Want to mention we're about 6 minutes after 9 o'clock, maybe closer to 6 minutes after 9. 45 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's been a while since we had an opportunity to speak with Darr Moon. As I mentioned earlier, he's the man who created the web presence known as Idaho on Fire. And he was with us shortly after he created all of that. And it's become, if you go to the Facebook page, I mean, it's amazing the number of people who actually follow that. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we're at a balmy 50 at the moment. It might be a little cooler where Mr. Moon is this morning, but probably prettier. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Bill, for having me. Yeah, long time no talk to. And, I was just, while you were mentioning Idaho on Fire, I was thinking maybe I should have changed it to America on Fire.
Yeah.
It's and it is quite nice up here, but unfortunately you can't see very far. We've got that smoke all across the west, from Twin Falls all the way north to Canada. And if you've seen the InsaWeb map, you'll see why. There's fires all across the western United States, and this is an unfortunate new normal, and it didn't used to be. And that's it's a shame in many, many regards, but I think it all kind of boils down to improper forest management, and management that we no longer, look towards our successors in the forest management business to see how forest management practices kept the forest from burning for the most part in years back.
Well, slowly but surely. I don't know how quickly it's going to happen. We've been hearing that the left, they've been arguing, of course, climate change at every opportunity because this is, they just see this as what's the old line from Rahm Emanuel? No one wants a good crisis to go to waste. However, last week I'm told the New York Times grudgingly admitted that there may be some aspect of forest management, especially what's left on the forest floor, that's behind this. And then Kate Brown from Oregon did an interview on CBS a couple of days back where, again, grudgingly in the middle of it, when she was pressed by the reporter doing a random act of journalism, as Rush Limbaugh calls it, she said, well, yeah, there may be some issues with some of that forest management, too, as well. So we're starting to see people come around, and I suspect that's because a lot of even liberal property owners, when they see their homes just as rubble, likely are starting to ask some more questions of these people who've been selling them a bill of goods. Is that your take, too?
Yes, it is, Bill. And, what can't go on forever won't. And unfortunately, the public at large is unaware of how desperate the forest situation is. They're overgrown. There's been a lot of beetle kill. It's not been taken care of. They've let nature take care of it, and this is what nature does. And nature, when it lights up and goes, it doesn't care too much about your political persuasion. But in all of this, people are becoming aware because it's right there in front of you every day. And the liberals along the West Coast breathe this smoke in. Maybe that's why they should wear masks. But there's political pressure that's building, and that's a big part of what Idaho on Fire is trying to do, is trying to build political pressure with people in the know, people who work in the industry, and project that out to the political leaders who can see it. And, they're going to have to, they will pay a price for not listening to the people here out west, and to some of the great foresters that have long now since retired from the Forest Service. There's going to have to be a change. And I don't know how many homes have to burn before people get that figured out, but I suspect that we're on the cusp of seeing some revolutionary changes in the forest, and I do hope, and I do think that President Trump has got his finger on that pulse. So, the well of power and change comes from the people, and the more people that can stand up and challenge these forest management policies, the sooner we will turn this around.
And you referenced that. It's key, though, I think, that we still have a President Trump come next year, because if we have Biden or Harris or whatever committee they'd be using, and then they grab control of the U.S. Senate as well, they're going to completely bury forest management and just go back to the canard about what do you call it again? Climate change.
Well, that is their fallback position. Of course, something has to be blamed for this, and climate change is the mantra. There have been generations now of people growing up, going to school, hearing about climate change and how it affects, how humans affect climate, and so it's a logical, consequence in many, many minds. But this isn't a climate change problem. And I think the longer it goes on, the more people will realize that. This emperor doesn't have any clothes. And the Trump election is critical. If Biden wins this, this will be projected well into the future, because the forests are going to burn. We are 30 years, almost 40 years out from being able to get back to where we were in the early 90s, late 80s. I think 1994 was the last time that the Forest Service brought revenue to the budget. And now they're a major deficit, I think $12 billion in projects that they can't fund or do. And, we're burning down a resource that could be providing good jobs and helping the environment. So that message is starting to ring. I hope it turns around, but there are a lot of people that don't see it our way.
Darr Moon is joining us this morning, and he's the man behind Idaho on Fire, along with several other people. We should point out, though, he's a geologist as well, and has quite a bit of background in soil and what's underneath it, and spending some time with us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I've got 50 at 9:14. Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning. When you reference this, if the federal government were to get out of the way, I wonder if we just started, there would be, I would imagine, thousands of Idahoans and maybe Oregonians and Washingtonians and Californians who would all just say, look, we'll all go out on our own and do this as volunteer brigades, and we'll clean this up. But that federal presence is what's preventing something like that from happening.
It certainly is. You have to have a firewood permit. You can be arrested, thrown in jail if you don't have one to pick up even firewood. The solution is to let the states begin taking over the forests. The state of Idaho, on their forests, it's about 6% of the forest, while the balance of the remaining forest is federal. That 6% of the forest brings over $40 million a year of revenue to schools, for schools. And the federal forests in Idaho and now much of the West cost us hundreds of millions. This year will probably be in the $1 billion range to manage fire. And so we have proven that Idaho can do a much better job of managing forests and bringing it to productive use for people. Not only is it helping our students and schools, but it's employing people and giving people jobs in rural areas, which are drying up. I mean, we used to have sawmills here in central Idaho, and they're just about all gone. And those provided jobs. Our western way of life is changing. Here in Custer County, the median population is over 50 because kids can't come back. There's no opportunity. And yet we live in the land of opportunity, especially in Idaho, with our rich mineral resources and grazing resources and timber resources.
We wanted to mention a little bit about the slogan that you have that has been adopted by a great many people across the West. And can you reiterate what that is, about how you cure this?
Well, we have to cure this by reaching out to people, but we promote a bumper sticker that says, log it, graze it, or watch it burn. And that that's a reality. It's obvious, and we just need to keep ringing that bell. And just as Democrats don't like a crisis to go to waste, we need to learn to play from that book a little bit, because we are in a crisis, in all kinds of crises. And they're man-made, manufactured crises, all the way from the social issues to our loss of industry to the management of our environment. And, I kind of believe that most ranchers and loggers are much better environmentalists than these Ivy League trained eggheads that are now running the forest.
We got a caller looking to join us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Darr Moon on KLIX.
Well, this is 2012 in Idaho County. The gentleman up there, he ran for office. I got to know him. You probably know him, Darr. And he was talking about in Idaho County how many acres burnt that year. And he talked about how many millions of dollars were lost on the stump. So in other words, a tree that was burnt. And then he says, if you would have harvested those trees that were destroyed, wasted, and harvested those trees, that the amount of income for the state of Idaho or Idaho County or those companies that would have done that business was in the close to, almost $1 billion worth of lumber that was lost. And we just keep talking. We just keep talking. And every time you go up to the forest and you see where it burned another spot, and you say, well, I'll never see it the way it was. And my kids, they don't know what we knew. And this stuff never used to happen. In the 70s, early 80s, we never had this kind of stuff. It is so heartbreaking, infuriating. I'll hang up. Thank you.
I want to thank him for the call, by the way. We can get back to that in just about 30 seconds, but I've got to get to a break if that's okay.
That sounds good.
We've got more coming up with Darr Moon, with Idaho on Fire in just a few minutes. And Bill Colley with you, too, on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It is at 49 this morning, and of course, as Mr. Moon pointed out, if you're looking up at the sky just about anywhere in the Northwest today, and the Intermountain West, you're going to see a lot of haze up there. Yesterday, I heard that it had reached the East Coast, so they're now experiencing this all the way out in places like New England and perhaps the middle Atlantic states. And if they're getting a taste of this, perhaps it might start to wake up a few of these policy people. And again, more coming up in just a moment. It's 20 after 9. We're at 51. Darr Moon spending some time with us this morning. Again, he's the man who created the Facebook page, Idaho on Fire. I believe there's also a web presence as well with that, too. And it's looking for solutions, as he pointed out a few minutes ago, by applying some public pressure, if you will, to various people in government to try to change the way we do forest management, maybe returning to some of the older ways. It's a balmy 50. We're at 9:23. Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And Darr, did you have any response to our previous caller?
Well, yes. These fires are an environmental disaster, and a disaster that we didn't experience in the 70s, 60s, and 70s while we were managing the forest. And I feel very much the same. It's horrifying to have lived in the woods here and see them go up in flames. But it's more than just the trees. It's the habitat. It's truly devastating for all the critters that live in our forests. And in the springtime, you'll see the runoff and several of these little tributaries just run black with soot. And soil erosion and all these other things, all these other environmental catastrophes, had it been by the hand of a human, you'd all be in prison. But for some reason, and paradoxically so, the environmental movement has been able to stand by the let it burn policy without regard to the environment at all, and especially without regard to the human tragedy. as our rural areas in the woods can no longer provide opportunity for kids to come back home. And so it's a huge problem, and the solution isn't so complicated. We know the solution.
We've got another caller looking to join us. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX at 925.
Good morning. 50 years ago, the EPA banned DDT, and DDT was used successfully for years to control pine beetle. And William Ruckelshaus, who came from the World Wildlife Fund, was the first EPA administrator. There was over 9,000 pages of testimony on the DDT. Almost all of it was in favor of keeping DDT with some restrictions. But he never attended any of the sessions. He apparently never read any of the transcripts. He had a political agenda, and that was to ban DDT, and the rest is... we had malaria almost controlled worldwide at the same time. And India is the only place now that manufactures DDT, but it needs to be brought back. We need to put pressure on our elected people at all levels, because the pine beetles are going to continue unless we find some way to slow them down. We need to do the other things, the logging and clear out the brush and so forth. But the forests are dying, and it's sad when I travel around the West and see what's happening here. But I appreciate Darr and all that he's done with his organization, but we got to bring back something. DDT was very safe to use for humans. It didn't have the environmental impact that other types of insecticides might have, but it was banned. And anyway, we need to bring it back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. His point is that there are some things that we could use safely, I think, today. We wouldn't have to overdo it, but that we could still use them.
Well, there are. And in the early infestation, in the pine beetle, I wrote a letter, I think it was in 1989, to the forest supervisor in our area, because right there along the Stanley River, or the Salmon River near Stanley, there were some trees that were turning from beetle kill. And I wrote and told them, you need to take those trees out. You've got to get on this beetle kill quick. And, of course, they didn't. There were a lot of excuses. Well, and one of the silly ones was that these trees were growing right along the river, and you can't cut trees within 300 feet of the river, because it might fall and disturb a salmon or something. Well, so they didn't do anything about it, and, of course, the beetle spread and wiped out huge tracts of our forest up here. And it's quite a contrast, our beautiful mountains and then our dead forest. And people come here to this area to recreate, so they see it. But there was opportunity to try to fight this, and the forest managers at the time turned a blind eye to it. And this is, for every action, there's a reaction. And so humans are part of this equation. We've been in forest management for a long, long time, and as we retreated, then the other natural consequences come in. And this is what we'll live with. And, forests, this is kind of their life cycle. Beetles aren't anything new, but, the 1910 fire in Idaho wiped out huge tracts of forest. They were unmanageable, weren't managed at the time because we couldn't do it. And that's when the Forest Service was really born, to study the problem, and they did a fantastic job. The Forest Service was some of the elite. Every kid wanted to be a forest ranger when they grew up because they worked in the woods and they provided an economy, and they were doing great work and keeping fire down. And we're right back to the same kind of thing that happened in 1910. Our forests have grown old now in the last 30 years since not logging, and they're going to burn. And unfortunately, this is a long-term problem. We'll be another 30 years burning before we can, if we even get back in the forest to clean it out.
Can you stick around a few more minutes?
Sure, thanks.
We've got more coming up with Darr Moon from Idaho on Fire. It's 51. We're at 9:30. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Darr Moon joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's 9:33. We're at 50. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning. And we do want to mention the telephone number if you'd like to reach our guest is 208-736-0300. And he's the man who created this web presence called Idaho on Fire with the idea that just a little independent public pressure could perhaps change forest policy, which means we could eventually stop some of these massive burns. And Darr, we have a caller looking to join us. I'm not surprised.
Very good.
All right. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Darr Moon. Go ahead.
A friend of mine in Northern California, Marysville, Yuba City, was near a fire, and there was poison oak burning, and it affected his lungs really well.
Oh, I was going to say, the stuff that's in the smoke is just amazing.
Well, it is affecting people's health. And here in the valleys that the smoke fills, especially people with emphysema and other lung disorders are in jeopardy. A lot of people in our area, in Chalice, have to leave during the summer fires because that smoke just settles in the valley there. That's another consequence that people don't realize so much. People, especially on the East Coast, that don't see it. But as Bill was mentioning, the smoke's blowing their way. And unfortunately, I think that's the only way this is going to change is a huge amount of public pressure. Stop and smell the smoke. And they are. So the other thing about Idaho on Fire that is, I think, hopeful is that several legislators are on the site. And so they may not chime in, but they do read a lot of what's happening there. And so we're trying to be more politically influential. And it's a way to address some grievances and some issues that are out there that they might see. I might also mention that our member, it's a private group, so you have to ask to join. But we would maybe get 3 to 5 people asking to join a week, and now we're about 25 a day. So I do filter through them, but it's a sign, too, that people are wanting some answers, wanting to know where to go to seek some answers and find out some truth. So we hope to provide that and some lively conversation at times.
I chatted with a reporter in Boise one time who tried to play dumb and said that he was unaware of your site. And I said, no, don't give me that. If you're in the media and you're working at the Statesman, you can't possibly not know that there's this presence called Idaho on Fire. I think sometimes the media wants to be selective about what it actually pays attention to.
Well, they definitely know we're here. I doubt that many are on because I do sort of screen the group. There are a few libs on there, just to make it interesting at times. But the media only reports what they want to report. I think we all know that. It's filtered and sanitized to their liking. And, the Internet, the Facebook and such, it is not the greatest place in all cases to get your news, but there's a lot of interesting comment. We try to keep it factual. There's a lot of very intelligent people on our site that have a lot of experience in resources, not only just forestry, but mining and ranching and such. And so we're trying to be an encompassing sort of the Western way of life site, and to preserve those ways so that we can, let future generations enjoy our great state, the great resources we have, and work toward preserving them, and bolstering the economy at the same time.
Got a couple of minutes before the break. I hope you can stick around till 10 o'clock.
Sure, can.
Before we do that, you joked with me off air that this could become, Western states on fire. I imagine you're getting a lot of inquiries from people on the left coast right now about what you're doing.
Well, we do. Most of the people who are joining are Westerners. A lot of Californians now are on the site because they are really paying a price. the fire year in Idaho is pretty much is similar to many fire years. Most of the smoke we're seeing is rolling up from California or blowing in from Oregon. The West Coast is really on fire. And, I mean, you've probably seen pictures of San Francisco and stuff.
Yeah.
They just look like a picture out of hell. And it's becoming more like hell in San Francisco all the time. So the smoke is just an interesting backdrop to the whole social consequence. But, you know, people are going to make this change, and even the Democrats are going to have to do something about it. So we hope that we can change it before it's not changeable. I know the Forest Service even is going about on lectures as how do you like your smoke and how do you like your fire, as this is as becoming the new normal and to expect it for years into the future. And it's not normal, and it's not right, and it has to change. And we're hopeful that we can be a part of that change through public action, through political action. You know, local people need to get involved. They need to talk to their county commissioners. They need to even talk to their school boards and districts, because a good amount of money that would go to supply you know, the needs of our education are going up in smoke.
We've got more coming up with Darr Moon from Idaho on Fire. It's 9:40. We're at 50. Bill Colley, too, on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Be patient. If you've got a comment or question, we'll try to get to that in the last 15 minutes. Final few minutes of our program this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It is Magic Valley this morning. I'll get that out. Do my Elmer Fudd, or was it? Yeah, it was Elmer Fudd. No, it's been a long time since I watched any cartoons. We've got Darr Moon joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX. He is from Idaho on Fire, and he's taking some comments and questions you may have, too, about fire season and what we're going through this year, which has just been maybe the worst I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I'm not saying I've been around that long, but I'm beyond average. I'll put it that way. And Bill Colley with you, too, until 10 a.m. It's 53 at 9:43. We should probably mention, you referenced this earlier, the 1910 fire. I have been up to Shoshone County, and there's still areas that are still recovering from what happened more than a century ago with the big burn they had up there. And there's a magnificent display at the State Museum about all of that. But that was what led to a lot of the modern thinking about fire suppression. And we perhaps have to stand back and say, you know what? 110 years later, maybe it's time to rethink some of this.
Well, we've really come full circle on this. You know, in 1910, Idaho was still quite primitive. We had old mining roads and a few things like that, but a big part of it was access to be able to get to the fire. And of course, the logging roads provided access. The logging provided fire breaks, and it was the beginnings of a very well-managed forest. And as I mentioned, the Forest Service was revered as being able to tackle this huge problem. And by the 40s, timber production in America was leading the way across the world, and it was providing jobs. I don't know if any of you listeners are builders out there, but they're certainly aware of the price of timber now, or lumber. It's over the roof, and we have to import it from Canada and elsewhere, which is just a shame. If anything that we've learned from this COVID crisis is how dependent we are on foreign sources for about everything. The supply chain was broken rapidly, and we saw things fall apart in all kinds of regards. Well, you know, if we don't take care of our own forests and provide timber for our building communities, and believe me, things are moving in Idaho, because I think a lot of folks in the big city areas that can get out are coming to Idaho. And this requires materials, and we have them, and to let them go up in flames is really quite a shame.
We've got a caller looking to join us. Caller, you're on the air on KLIX with Darr Moon. Caller, go ahead. We may have lost our caller. I've got a couple of messages that are coming in via the app function, and one of them is I've got to actually open this up to see what the entire message reads, but it comes in from a mutual friend in Rupert, and she says, have Darr talk about the rally yesterday in Stanley. And you know what? When Anna says do it, you got to do it.
Well, I was fortunate to be able to go to the Trump rally, and Donald Trump Jr. was there speaking, and Kimberly Guilfoyle. And it was really quite well attended. I was sort of surprised. I, of course, have some advantages that most don't because my wife is a state legislator. So she was invited by family friends who held this at their absolutely beautiful mansion home. And it was an enlightening event. There were several politicos there, and we heard Donald Trump speak, and he's quite the wit, quite an entertaining speech. Has a little bit of his dad's swagger for sure. But they raised quite a lot of money for the Trump campaign, and yeah, it was all good fun.
Did Mr. Trump, the younger Mr. Trump, I mean, he got to look at obviously what's in the sky. I would imagine that may have left an impression upon him.
Well, I'm sure it did. Now, unfortunately, I was really hoping to talk to him because, of course, I'm kind of political that way too, and I had lots to convey. But, they landed in Sun Valley in smoke, and they flew over to Stanley in smoke, and, the Stanley Valley is a beautiful scene this time of year, and you could not see the mountains at all. And so it was quite a backdrop to what's going on in the forest. And, of course, it's on everybody's mind. And I welcome those political leaders and the campaign people that followed him around. And there were several. Most of the upper end of the Idaho Republican people were at the meeting and at the rally. And, we all see this together, and that's the number one question. The governor was there. He mentioned to Kimberly Guilfoyle, who is from San Francisco, that, we didn't need to, we welcomed her here, but not all the smoke the Californians are sending us. But it was very nice. Kimberly did a great tribute to Janice McGeehan, who was there. And, of course, Janice is a great supporter of the resource industry in Idaho, and she's a gal of the people, and Kimberly really made a very fine tribute to her. So we were in good company in that regard, and a beautiful place, and a lot more people than I thought would show up. So a good time was had by all.
We have another caller. Caller, you're on the air with Darr Moon on KLIX at 949. Go ahead.
Grazing animals create fire breaks.
There you go. That goes back to we were mentioning this, I think, at the beginning of the hour, is that this is what the old timers knew, and yet we've just decided we're going to throw all of that out.
Well, we have, and not only have we thrown it out, we've pushed them out. We pushed these cattlemen out of the range, and that's what kept the fires down. And there's a symbiotic relationship between cattle grazing and a good environment and no forest. And you can see it's plain where they've grazed lands, they don't have the same kind of fire as to where we've run the ranchers off the range and reduced their animal allocations and introduced wolves to drive them out. Everything good and wholesome is under attack, is on fire. And it includes all of the resource people that earned their living on the range or in the logging or in the mining community. And we're paying dues for that right now. So I think it's a big wake-up call. And the older folks in my generation now, they know it. Younger folks, though, they haven't really lived it. They haven't seen how pristine the forest used to be. But they're filled with deadfall now. From the beetle kill, you guys had the big wind here the other day too. Well, we did up here too, and man, all these old lodgepole pines are just falling over, and it's just a maze of a thicket on the forest floor.
We have another caller. Caller, you're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Hello, on the air?
Yeah, go ahead, caller.
Okay. This is a BLM guy on there now?
No, he's from Idaho on Fire.
Idaho on fire. Well, anyway, there's a whole lot of things that causes this fire. They don't have no cattle up there no more. They don't have no logging trails up there no more. They don't have no private enterprise taking care of that.
Key there, thank you for the call. Key private enterprise. If we didn't have all of these federal lands, he brings up a point. If we could, responsibly log areas of Idaho where currently we're banned from doing that, what do you think that would do for the economy?
Well, it would be great for the economy and the environment. It would bring opportunity to rural areas. It'd be an opportunity for kids to come back home to their rural homes because they can't now. And so, it was the fire management plan. And as I mentioned, the Forest Service was a revered agency. Smokey the Bear was, the big calling card. And we did prevent fires, and we prevented them in ways that enhanced our economy and enhanced the environment and provided for resources for a growing America. And we can do the same. It's not so complicated. And it's not a consequence of global warming. It's irritating and frustrating to see how the liberal education system has cornered us and cornered so many generations now of people who have no idea the beauty of the Western forest. And it's going to take a long time to get back there. So it's our duty to save our beautiful country, our beautiful Idaho, and I think we can.
Well, we'll squeeze one more caller in. I'm coming up on pretty close to the end of the show. Caller, you're on the air on KLIX with Darr Moon.
Hi there. My name's Jeff. I live here in Twin Falls, and my grandfather was the regional forester for 24 forests in the 1950s. And I have all of his writings. And I can tell you that the forest management problems that are here are real. That is not the way the Forest Service used to manage forests.
I thank you for the call. He's as he says, he's got all the books left by his grandfather and different type of characters than I think they were. I'm not going to say they were stronger people, but they certainly, maybe because they were closer to the land, they better understood it.
Well, they were get things done people because it was their responsibility, their charge, and they just rose to the occasion. I've read through some of the old journals, too, from forest rangers in our area, and I found it just fascinating. There was a lightning strike, and written in the journal, the forest ranger takes Bob the mechanic and John the man with the tractor, and they go out and fight the fire. And the three of them go out, and this is like 1922. They come back 3 days later, and they got the fire out, and they totaled up their expenses, and it was like $27.50. And it was, it wasn't call in hell attack and spend millions of dollars in fire retardant. Man, when they got a fire going, they jumped on it, and they had fire lookouts in all these high peaks, and they called them in, and they jumped right on them, and they could get to them because there were logging roads to get to, and they made short work of it where they could. And those kind of people with that kind of grit, it's hard to find them these days.
We've got about 2 minutes left. We've been remiss in that we haven't mentioned that, at least on the state level, you have a well-known member of your family who's trying to work on some of these issues.
Well, yes, she is. She's working very hard on it, and we're having some success. Actually, they've been given a grant to study areas within the Chalice National Forest to log under the plan that was proposed by the Forest Service and the Forest Supervisor. Of the 4.2 million acres in the Chalice or Salmon Chalice, only 400 acres were available for logging. And that's changed now. And the University of Idaho has done a study, And we are actively pursuing a logging operation, cleaning up operation that will cover over 400,000 acres in the Chalice, or the salmon chalice. I always say Chalice salmon because in the old days they were two forests, the Chalice and the salmon. But yeah, it's wonderful news. And these small things are happening, and I think they'll snowball when people realize that, hey, we've got to get back to the forest. We've got to be proud of what our former forest supervisors and rangers had done, and work together to make this happen.
Yeah, we got to remind people that Mrs. Moon represents a district that stretches from the Montana state line all the way to the Oregon state line on the other side of the state. District 8 is massive.
Well, it is massive. In fact, last night, the rally for the campaign rally was about 45 minutes away, and that was the closest event that we've ever been to, because everything's 200 miles away. Her district is 16,000 square miles, so she puts a lot of miles on the rig.
Yeah, but you get to see beautiful country.
We live in a very beautiful part of the world, and we're very proud of it, and we want to keep it that way. And I think we're on the right track, and with a lot of help from the public and pull with the legislature, I think we're going to make some traction. But Idaho is 67% federal, and so we don't have a lot of jurisdiction there, and we got to push our federal congressmen, senators, and our president, and everybody we can talk to turn this around, because we're not going to live in this kind of a smoky, eerie environment, and we don't have to.
Darr Moon, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk soon.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Have a great day. Darr Moon is with Idaho on Fire, and of course mentioning his wife, Dorothy Moon, serving in the Idaho State Legislature, Representative Moon, and also a geologist, we should point out, too, as well. 9:58, we've got a break for news on the Rush Limbaugh program. I'll be back in 20 hours, God willing, and the creek don't rise, between 6 and 10 a.m. on Thursday morning.